The opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Welcome, my name is Karen Wolfe and I'll be your host for this edition of Politically Speaking. This is the Rogers TV program that engages our community leaders around issues that are important to you. Now, it's been a year since we sat down with the Conservative Member of Parliament for York Simcoe, Scot Davidson, and we're delighted that we're able to connect with him today virtually, and he's going to share with us some of his experiences at the Parliament buildings and some of the work that he's been doing since we last spoke. Now, we're going to be doing this interview a little bit differently than we normally do. And in our first segment, Mr. Davidson has agreed to meet with us inside the Parliament buildings. And then for the rest of the interview, we'll be sitting down with him from his offices there. So, Mr. Davidson, I want to welcome you to the show and thank you so much for being with us and actually brightening up and giving us the benefit of the backdrop.
Thanks, Karen. How you doing, everyone? We are actually, we are live in Ottawa. Let me just take my mask off, Karen. We're being very safe here today and in Ottawa, and I thought it would be interesting for your viewers to give them sort of a live look. We are actually right outside the House of Commons in West Block right now, where people might find this area familiar. This is usually where the press gallery is. This is where the scrums take place. There isn't one going on right now, and actually MPs, there's a few things going on that's made it actually quite a busy day, so I kind of had to sneak out in the middle of this, but it's great. I just wanted to wish, because it is December 10th, we're this close, wish everyone in York Simcoe, Georgina, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
We got your Christmas card yesterday. It's great.
Hey, no, it was great. It's great.
Okay, so Scott, behind you, those doors behind you, where do they lead?
So those doors behind me, if we were to open them, the house is sitting right now, and you're not allowed to take a live shot of the house. But if we open these doors, that would show you directly into the House of Commons, the chamber itself. So we are right out in front. Okay,
so give us an idea of what we, if you can pan. I don't know if we can pan the area, but give us a sense of what we're seeing here.
Okay, so this is the main foyer. There's the main gathering foyer, I would say. This is where the elevators come up from downstairs. And again, we're in West Block because Center Block is under construction right now. That's a massive project that's going on. So they've actually built a new chamber right here. And so in this area, again, this is sort of the meeting. They call it the gallery. This is where the scrums happen, and there's many pictures of former prime ministers.
Okay, and how long will you be in West Block?
The project on Center Block is supposed to take 10 years. They're actually talking 12 years now.
Wow.
So I may never get to see Center Block, Karen. But it is an enormous project. There's a lot of work to be done over there, and it is a massive project. So it is a 10 to 12 year project.
I see. So what is going on in the House of Commons today?
Well, today, and that was kind of what happened while I was in there and to dart out before. So debate has just collapsed on the medical assisted dying legislation. Yeah. Yes, Bill C7, which is a very important piece of legislation that we've been debating, I'll say the past couple of weeks. And that we don't know yet, but that is probably going to go to a vote today following question period. I'm waiting to hear on that. So we'll be voting again on that legislation, seeing that debate has collapsed.
Okay, what do you mean? What do you mean when you say debate has collapsed? What do you mean?
Basically, that the government has moved now the legislation that everyone that wanted to speak on the bill has spoken, and it's not going to be dragged out longer and longer. They want to get this vote done, the government, before the break. It was our feeling as a Conservative caucus that, I mean, we can talk about it. The government prorogued back in the summer, as you know, and we had a lot of groups, disability groups, a lot of Canadians that couldn't give testimony that wanted to at Justice. So this legislation became really rammy for us. And we can see that by the debate that's come in the House. This is such an important piece of legislation. We wanted to hear from all Canadians. So anyways, it's going to go to a vote, obviously minority opponent. We'll see how that vote takes place, and it will be moved to the Senate. And hopefully the Senate will make some amendments to it and bring it back to the House.
I see. Okay. So tell us a little bit about the process inside the House of Commons during question period. What are the protocols that have to be followed in order for you to ask a question there? That's
interesting, Karen. So when I first got here, normally new MPs actually have a course they take for about, I'm going to say 45 to 60 days. So when you come in a by-election, my very first day in the House of Commons after I sworn in, the by-election was February 25th. I wasn't sworn in until March 21st. So my very first day in the House of Commons, I sat in my seat. I hadn't had any course whatsoever. I really didn't know what was going on, to be honest with you, which was a lot of fun. So you're drinking out of a fire hose. And I got notice that very next day that I had a question, and I had to go in and ask. I didn't even have an office yet. I was actually working out of my truck, had to handwrite a question, and I didn't even know how long a question was, because these are questions that you didn't know. Because so there was some MPs that sat down with me, spent some time with me. So basically a question in the House of Commons, so people know, you have 35 seconds during question period. They like a question delivered in 33 seconds. That gives you some space. And sometimes, believe it or not, like a lot of people say, oh, why don't you just freewheel your question? Sometimes today I could be given a question on a topic today, Karen, that you could get at realistically 1:30 today, and question period starts at 2 o'clock. So sometimes it can be on a topic that they may ask you to deliver a question on or write a question that just comes out of the blue.
Now, who's they when you say they are asking you to ask the question?
So we have a question period coordinator that's looking at issues of the day. Every MP is allowed to submit questions that is relevant throughout the year on their riding. Also, every MP, so you know, at the beginning of question period, which starts at 2 o'clock till 2:15, there's called statements by members. They're called SO 31s, and that just refers to the Standing Order 31. So every MP gets 3 of those throughout the year, and you can talk about anything you want. And when I deliver those, I usually like to talk about things that are going on in the riding in the community because that's what's important.
Yeah. Now, do you sit on any committees?
Right now, I sit on, so people know, I was elected, and I'm proud to say I was elected the Ontario Caucus Chair. So I'm in charge of 36 Ontario MPs in the Conservative Caucus. So that keeps me busy. And I was on public accounts when I first got here, then transportation, and now I'm on regulations. And I do have I actually have 2 people who have just walked out of the House.
Oh, okay.
2 important people. They're actually our neighbors. And if I can introduce the one who's a dear friend, Bruce Stanton, if you could, Bruce. This is the Deputy Speaker. Bruce is in the chair today, in the chamber. They say hello. Thanks for stopping by. So he is our neighbor in Simcoe North, which is right across the lake in Aurelia. One of our Lake Simcoe SPs.
Right in the middle of Lake Simcoe.
That's right. Our ridings actually meet in the middle of Lake Simcoe.
So he's certainly aware of all the issues that you're always champion.
Yes, I'm aware of all the issues. You are.
Most definitely. And, I don't know what you can hear me.
I know. That's all right. It's a marble floor.
I just want to take this opportunity to wish everyone a wonderful Christmas and holiday season ahead. And it's really great to work with my colleagues.
Okay, we can't hear him. We can't hear him from there.
That's okay. Anyways, okay. He wished everyone a happy New Year. And we have one more One more MP. This is Doug Shipley of Barrie Springwater Oil Medonte.
Mr. Shipley, nice to meet you.
Oh, it's a microphone.
Okay,
Hello, everybody.
how are
Nice
you?
to meet you. How are you?
Nice to see everybody there. Beautiful York.
So,
Listen,
Sorry about that, Scott.
so can I ask you, tell our audience a little bit about Scott as an MP?
tell them a little bit about me as an MP.
How much time do I have? Scott's probably one of the most congenial guys here. Scott is one of the guys who really reaches across party lines. Scott has been a very good friend of mine, a good colleague. He hasn't been here very long. You think he's been here forever. Everybody knows Scott. He knows how to get things done. One of the hardest working guys. He's already our Ontario caucus chair. How do I take this off? That's a little better. He's already our Ontario caucus chair. He knows how to get things done. He knows everybody on each and every party that's in here. You walk down the hall with Scott, everybody knows Scott, which is a good thing. Sometimes you need to get together across party lines to make things get done. And Scott is one of those guys who definitely knows how to get things done.
Well, that's
Thanks,
good.
Doug.
That's good for us to know.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You can still hear me, Karen. He
Yes.
says Merry Christmas.
Okay, Scott. So we were talking about some of the committees that you're working on. And so when something goes to committee, give us the process after the committee has looked at it. Where does it go from there?
So usually what happens, Karen, is the committees that look at, let's say, bills that are before the House or things that committees at the beginning of the year put forth motions, every single party that they want to study throughout the year. They may, like when we were on Transport Committee, we were, for one example, studying the 737 MAX. And looking at all the information, what happened with that aircraft and everything else. So what happens is we will bring in witness and testimony on that. And to hear from all parties involved, whether it's airline unions, pilots, obviously passengers, and passengers' families that were involved in those horrific crashes of that aircraft. So that's the sort of things that go on. And then if there's government legislation, for example, on C7, the bill, the medical assisted in dying bill, that went in front of Justice Committee. And one of the things with that was there was thousands of doctors and thousands of witnesses that still wanted to testify. And again, it was our feeling at the government that the government should have asked for an extended on that legislation, just due to the fact, Karen, that they prorogued Parliament for 6 weeks, and we lost a lot of critical time on certain things in those 6 weeks.
So how long, would it stay in committee before? And I guess you have to write a report. Is that the idea? The committee writes a report and that goes back to the House of Commons, that report, and recommendations in that report, I'm assuming? Is that the idea? So how long, I guess different committees would take, different lengths of time to really examine the issue that you're looking at. But let's take, the assisted dying bill right now. How long were you in committee with that?
That was in committee for 3 days, which wasn't long enough, Karen. There was an extension asked for in committee there were so many people that wanted to testify, vulnerable Canadians groups, disability groups, and basically they were overridden in the Justice Committee, and it was brought back to the House. And of the conservative arguments on that legislation. I'm a big believer in hearing from everyone, and we always need openness and transparency, as you know. And so that is one of the flaws in this legislation. We didn't hear from everybody that wanted to speak on this issue. And so that is one of the reasons why we are, and myself, will not be supporting this legislation as it sits right now.
Okay, so very quickly, because I think we're coming to the end of this segment, very quickly, when are you in Ottawa and when are you in your constituency?
So normally we would be in Ottawa every week except for spring break. Right now it's every 3 weeks. Caucus has been split up into 6 groups, the Conservative MPs and the Liberals as well. So
Okay,
we all rotate. Okay.
We're gonna have to take a break. We'll get back
we
to
can
that
talk
in our
forever.
we'll start off in our next segment. Thank you very much, and don't go away. We'll be back with Mr. Davidson in the next segment. Welcome back. My name is Karen Wolfe, and I'm here with the Conservative MP, Scot Davidson, and he's coming to us from his office in Ottawa. So, Scott, welcome back.
Hi, Karen. We made it back. Got to the office, ran
That's
all the
great.
way. It's all good.
Yeah. Did you have to run far?
No, we didn't have to run that far. It's
Okay.
good. I can get to my office in about 5 minutes.
Okay, Scott, we're getting right into it now. There's been a lot going on in Ottawa this year, and the majority of it has to do with announcing funding programs in response to COVID-19 pandemic. And what is Mr. Trudeau's party doing in response to the pandemic that your party would have done differently?
Well, I think, we appreciate what the Trudeau government has put forth, and we've supported all the legislation that comes through. If you remember, Karen, back when the first wage subsidy and the CERB was done, a lot of these programs were rushed, and that was our concern. And plus, Parliament was prorogued. There was a lot of discussions. When you lose 6 weeks in the middle of a pandemic for discussions, it becomes, difficult that way, and everything becomes really rammy. But moving forward now, we know that there's the haves and the have-nots now with this pandemic. I mean, a lot of us went on since you and I first chatted from when this whole thing, this whole pandemic started. That's why we're looking now for a more sectoral approach too. There's a lot of businesses now that have reached out. I can tell you, even in the riding, people in the travel business, we have a lot of employees that work for airlines. The airline business and sector is in dire need of some help. And as well, the rent subsidy program as well. We supported the government on this legislation because we know that Canadians needed the help, and small business especially needs the help right now.
Yeah. To date, from what I understand, $240 billion of federal money has been spent in response to the pandemic. And I also understand that it's been estimated that figure could be as high as $322 billion by the end of this fiscal year. So, what are your thoughts about that amount of money that's being spent?
Moving forward, Karen, the money had to be spent. I don't think any of us can argue it, but right now we have to take a look at more sectoral approach, and we all have to be mindful that on the backside of this, the Bank of Canada has been printing $5 billion every week. And, on the backside of this, we always have to be mindful we could have inflation. They're creating inflation. And all of a sudden, people don't think it, but interest rates could be rising. All of a sudden, to control inflation, that becomes, the Bank of Canada is exhausted. The government's fiscal policy will have to be to possibly raise rates to control inflation. And also remember, we have a devastated energy sector. That was Canada's only input of USD currency into the country. You could have a slipping Canadian dollar, and the government may be forced to prop up the Canadian dollar with higher interest rates as well. So these are all the factors at play that we have to be mindful about moving forward.
Yeah, and the media actually has been a little critical about transparency, where they have really wanted to know who is getting the money and how much money are they getting, and apparently that's not easy to find.
No, we're always struggling with this government. I got to be honest. I'm someone that always reaches out, and I have lots of great colleagues across the aisle, Karen. But it's one thing we all truly believe in openness and transparency. And look at when this thing began. Sometimes, I will have constituents. I always reach out to constituents, and sometimes they'll say, Scott, you're arguing with the government. We want you to work together. Rest assured, I always work with my colleagues. But again, we are Canada's official opposition in Ottawa. And our job, Karen, is to make the government the best it can be. That's what Canadians want. That's our job as an opposition, to hold the government to account and ask for transparency and accountability. You expect that. You expect that as a Canadian. You expect it as a taxpayer.
Yeah. So as an MP in Ottawa during this unprecedented time, so how are your responsibilities different from a non-pandemic environment?
Well, our responsibilities now, you know what, I'm going to go back to the beginning of this, Karen. When this whole thing started, my number one thing was helping the constituents. I love being, I'll call it a riding MP. I love spending my time in the riding. And when this whole thing, I think our duties in the beginning, as you know, Service Canada shut down. Our office in Holland Landing really became the Service Canada for the riding. And my job, I found in the beginning, was helping out old age homes and find PPE. And that was one of the things I pressed the government on, was to get rid of HST on PPE. I can remember going out in the beginning and I was personally buying PPE for old age homes. And also we have 28 homes for the mentally and physically challenged adults in York Simcoe, one of the highest in Canada. We have 28 of those homes, and they were struggling without PPE. And I would go and buy this stuff and I'm saying, why am I paying HST on life-saving stuff? So that's how things sort of changed in this pandemic. I became very focused on being in the riding, because at the time, as you know, Parliament was prorogued. We also, the House wasn't sitting. There was only 33 MPs, the same as it is now in Ottawa. So we actually could spend a lot more time helping people reaching out in the riding, which was very important.
And I think, very appreciated as well. And you're a resident of Georgina. I think, our audience knows you've lived here all of your life, and you've been a small business owner as well for years. So what are your thoughts about the debate that's going on right now in York Region regarding a lockdown to help reduce the spread of the virus? I guess the question is, and we're getting very close, should we or shouldn't we?
Well, I think right now, again, this goes back to openness and transparency. Karen, people have a lot of questions. And for me, let's say in the riding of York Simcoe, as residents know, I represent the great town of West Gwillimbury and Bradford. And so when I'm in Holland Landing, for example, when we had the lockdown and you couldn't go to a restaurant in York Region, but yet I could go across the road to a restaurant in Simcoe County, people would say, Scott, I don't understand this. And I think this is where we need more transparency. I mean, we know we have to listen to public health officials regarding the lockdowns, but I think, people have valid questions about, if they wanted to have a funeral, for example. They were only allowed 10 people. They had to sign in, and the protocols are super with mask, hand sanitizer. But then people would say, look, I'm going to a big box store and I've got 18 cash registers and 200 people in the store. I'm trying to understand this. Scott, explain it to me. So I think we have to be mindful as we move through this. Small business has really borne the brunt of the financial impact of this, right? In the business area that we're discussing. So I think we have to continually be mindful about that.
And when you say be mindful, I suspect that, that's got to be a comment and an issue that you will be, presenting when it's your turn to ask a question at question period.
Yeah, we've got a lot of important questions. I mean, there's a lineup of questions from here back to York Simcoe, Karen, I can tell you that. Moving forward, things that are important in the riding that I enjoy, I'll say, working behind the scenes with my colleagues on. For example, right now we have in Bradford, West Gwillimbury, I represent the Holland Marsh. That produces almost 70% of the fresh produce that we consume in Ontario. And they also ship a lot to the United States. So just for example, in this pandemic, farming has become very important. Food security has become very important. And farmers, they are looking for protection on their accounts receivable. They're not actually looking for a handout, but if someone goes bankrupt, they don't want to lose their farm because someone hasn't paid. They're looking to become secured creditors, which makes sense. So currently I'm trying to work with our Liberal colleagues to possibly as well get that put in the budget to give some farmers some help. And so there's some things moving forward. We've got to be thinking. I'm excited about 2021, Karen. I can tell you that's coming.
I think we're all looking forward to that.
I know. We're going to just put 2020 in the garbage.
Yes. And so with that comment, there's been a recent announcement that a vaccine is in our immediate future. And, how do you think the government should handle the distribution of a vaccine to ensure that it's distributed equitably? And, what do you think of the distribution plans that the government has in place and who should be on the priority list?
Yeah, well, the government, as you know, has engaged the Canadian military federally. As we know, the distribution, Karen, is actually going to be really the responsibility of the province. This is a provincial jurisdiction. But for me, I want to make sure, obviously, Northern Ontario, we've got a lot of First Nations. I know a lot of people in Northern Ontario. We just have a lot of questions that have to be answered about the vaccine on distribution. Are the people in the far north going to get the Pfizer vaccine that requires the freezing and the 2 shots? Or are they better off served with the other vaccine that's coming out, right? These are the questions we have about vaccines, holding the government to account, and because Canadians have this question. Yeah. I got to be honest, I have a lot of people, they're afraid to say, Karen, but we almost need a fact sheet on the vaccine to come out where it states what's in a vaccine, how it's made, so Canadians really understand, because a lot of people don't even know what's in the vaccine, how big is the needle, Scott? If I'm pregnant, do I take the vaccine? If I've had COVID, do I take the vaccine? What if I get COVID between the 2 shots? Canadians have lots of questions. So I think moving forward, more transparency from the government on these questions, who and when and how is everyone going to get it? These are all the important questions moving forward. And it's definitely a piece of the puzzle that we need.
Okay, so, I have heard that some northern communities have decided to just wait until something else comes along that isn't as critical in terms of having it put in a freezer. But when you say that, you've got all these questions coming from your residents, where are the answers to these questions?
This is what we are putting forth to the government. This is why we asked the press to pick up on these and actually look at what we're asking in the House of Commons. And this is what I said about an opposition making the government the best it can be. This is our job as MPs to ask the tough questions. One of the first things I came out and talked about, Karen, and I got to tell you, I got a little bit beat up about it by CBC, was rapid testing. This is another piece of the puzzle that we definitely need. We may end up with a lot of Canadians, for whatever reason, they may not, whether that number is 10%, 20, we don't know that yet, that may not take the vaccine. Maybe they're allergic. Maybe, they were pregnant and they're afraid to take it, or they don't want to take it. We are still going to need rapid testing as an important piece to the puzzle for Canadians, maybe even coming into the country. If they haven't taken the vaccine, we can give them a rapid test, and it takes 30 seconds and you can get on the airplane, you can open the borders. This is what can happen.
Yeah, so Canada currently doesn't have a domestic supplier of vaccine, and we're dependent on foreign suppliers. So, what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I would right at the beginning of this, Karen, even in my search at PPE, I got to tell you, that's one of the things that I'm concerned about in Canada is our lack of domestic manufacturing, and not just in vaccines, but in a lot of things. And I think that's a conversation that we are all starting to have about, is where does Canada fit in the world now in the manufacturing level? And I sort of have this debate all the time where, the government of Canada wants to encourage a low dollar for our exporters. And I said, this isn't like 1985. 5 now in Canada. We've lost a lot of our exporters, a lot of our manufacturers. And I think that's what Canadians are looking at now. And I think that's where sort of the buy local, buy Canadian things come. We have to be supportive of our innovative Canadian companies.
Okay, Mr. Davidson, we are going to have to take another break. And please don't go too far away. We'll be back with Mr. Davidson right after the break. Welcome back. My name is Karen Wolfe, and I'm meeting virtually with our Conservative MP, Scot Davidson. He's in his office in Ottawa, and we have been, well, actually, we visited the Parliament buildings first, and we've been chatting about the pandemic, but now we're going to move beyond that issue. And one of the issues that you've been championing is funding for Lake Simcoe. And recently, during question period, you decided to give a virtual 60-second member statement from the shores of Lake Simcoe instead of from your desk. So why did you decide to do that, Scott?
Well, Karen, I sometimes go outside of the box. I got in a wee bit of the trouble from the speaker on that. No, you know what? I didn't, they actually didn't know how to deal with that, to be honest. We are supposed to have neutral backgrounds. And I thought Lake Simcoe, you know, it's very positive, but it can't get any more neutral than standing in a pair of hip waders in the lake. I wanted again to draw attention to the issue with my colleagues, and believe it or not, the Minister of the Environment, I got a phone call from Jonathan Wilkinson after that, a little note, and he appreciated that, and other colleagues. And when they see me in the hallway here, they like that. It was to draw attention to the issue of Lake Simcoe. And as you know, the Liberal government made a promise of $40 million commitment to Lake Simcoe Cleanup Fund. And I'm old school, Karen. I believe in a handshake, and your word's your word. And so I am always going to be pressing for that money for Lake Simcoe.
Yeah, so you did accomplish what you set out to do then.
I did, but I haven't got the money. And you know what? I will give the Liberals minor credit, because they bugged me about this. Now, they came to the riding. They did an announcement for a phosphorus plant. That's a $16 million.
Yeah, actually, that's my next question. You know, the federal government recently announced $16 million in funding, which will be added to York Region's $24 million to build a stormwater treatment facility, you know, that is said to reduce the harmful impact of phosphorus by 40%, I think is what they're saying. So why doesn't this announcement fulfill the government's promise to protect Lake Simcoe?
Well, first of all, I joke with the minister to say, first of all, you're $24 million shy, because it was $40 million. And even if you want to stand at the podium and say, well, we've committed $16 million, look at this phosphorus plant is going to help. They came and did the announcement in the riding. Minister McKenna was there along with Minister Schultz, and you know, it was funny walking up the road. I said, it's funny that this plant's going to be located on the Holland River, Karen, in Bradford.
Yeah.
I'm just curious why we're doing the announcement here on the shores of Lake Simcoe and Willow Beach. And they said, Scott, it's to keep you quiet. We had to come and do. I said, this is great, because I've never had an announcement in the riding. So you know what? I'm happy. If someone gave us $20, I'm happy, Karen. And I'm happy about that. But there's many more things that have to be done on Lake Simcoe. We know there's creek restoration that has to be done. There's lots of work in the Holland Marsh. There's rewilding of flowers and banks, and all these little community-based projects that the Lake Simcoe Fund contributed to. We had committees set up, and I think this was a lot more local engagement of our citizens that was very important. And you know, it would have been possibly something, and I don't mind saying it, that we could have helped with the restoration of the Pefferlaw Dam. if we had to have that fund there now, right? So there's so many things this fund accomplished before, and I think the government, it's in the ministers. I think I may have to get in my hip waders one more time, Karen, but I think I will push the government to come clean and get it done at the end of the day.
Maybe you can put those hip waders and stand at the Pefferlaw Dam.
There you go. Whatever it takes, that's what you have to do now.
But I think, we have to be cognizant of the fact that, federal funding, because of this pandemic, it's understandable if the full promise hasn't been fulfilled and they had to claw it back a little bit. I mean, do you see that?
You know what? Everything's about negotiations, Karen. I mean, our commitment was 30 million from a conservative government. If we are elected, it's 40 million now. These are environmental issues that are still important. And I think moving forward, that's one thing that we always have to keep in mind. Government has to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. I have a lot of people even say, even now, Scott, we're in an unprecedented pandemic. I've heard that term so many times that it's unprecedented. And I think, we have to be able to be nimble now and do things quickly. And I think that's what this pandemic has taught us. We have to be able to turn things out a lot faster as a country than we did before. And Karen, I'm going to give you an example. I won't necessarily use names, but immigration has kept us very busy as well during this pandemic. And we have a company located in Bradford that they brought engineers here to install equipment, that was purchased in Italy pre-COVID. It's the only company in the world that makes this extraction machine that's used in the supply chain that makes PPE ventilator equipment. I had a heck of a time getting these engineers here. Once I did, they had to self-isolate for the 2 weeks in a hotel room, every hour paid for by the company, doing nothing for 2 weeks, sitting in a hotel room. They were fine. This company has asked for an extension of 30 days to have these individuals stay here. The government has said, no, under a 186A, Scott, we don't give extensions. I said, so what are they going to have to do? Well, they're going to have to fly back to Italy, self-isolate, Karen, for 2 weeks in Italy, then get on a plane, fly back to Canada, and self-isolate for 2 weeks. I said, I'm on the phone. I go, we can't operate like this anymore. I said, this is one little example of things that are going on behind the scenes.
An example of how frustrating this pandemic actually has caused across the board among everyone.
No, tons.
Yeah, absolutely. So another issue that I know that you're very passionate about, and that is getting the government to ban the export of non-recyclable plastics to foreign countries. So why is this issue so important to you, and what have you decided to do about it?
Well, I came out with a private members bill, Bill C-204. As you know, water is very important to me, Lake Simcoe, and it does matter to the residents of York Simcoe. We like clean water. And we've all seen the pictures in the Philippines of containers opening, and truly, if you look at those pictures, there are Canadian companies on that plastic. And we have now so many innovative Canadian companies now, Karen, that we don't need to be shipping our plastic to Bangladesh, the Philippines, who they just don't have the capability now that we do. So this is a very important bill. I've reached out to all parties on this, the Green Party, I've got some great NDP colleagues, obviously, as well as our party. The Liberals are still hesitant. I speak to this bill again. It'll probably be voted on the first week of February, and I speak to it again January 27th, I believe, if the date doesn't change, because some things have been, so I'm very excited. I think I'm going to get full support of the House on this.
Great. Now, isn't a private members bill has to be a bill that has no implications on the budget? Is that the idea?
That's right. So yeah, just so people, because a lot of people say, you know, if you have an opportunity for a private member's bill, why don't you say, you know, you'll give X amount of dollars to this, or I'll get rid of the tax on that. It's actually a tough question. If you actually ask, you know, residents, or what would you do a private member's bill on that doesn't cost any money? That sort of changes the game a bit, Karen.
Yeah.
When you ask that question, and you know, have to think about that.
Yeah. Now, what kind of plastic are we talking about? What kind of plastic waste is not being recycled that is being sent offshore?
The government of Canada, when I reached out to the Library of Parliament, there was tons of all different plastics being you know, sent in containers overseas and truly either being dumped in the ocean or burnt on the shores. And we've seen all those pictures of that. And, you know, when people think of Canada, Karen, they think of our pristine lakes. They think of our pristine rivers and water and, you know, waterfalls. I think that's what comes to mind when someone asks, you know, what is your first vision of Canada? You know, it might be that lake and Lake Louise, or, you know, for me, it's Lake Simcoe. But, you know, I think that's why this bill is very meaningful. We have to keep things circular in the economy now. And, you know, there's new companies out there that make dock materials now that last hundreds of years out of recycled plastic. And they go, Scott, we just need, you know, plastic to stay circular. We have the innovation in Canada to do it. And we have to be supportive of our small business and innovate right here in Canada on that.
Yeah, now, you know, that's part of a circular economy is, you know, giving birth to the product, using the product, and then having it put back into the economy. So if it's waste that's not being recycled and we're not exporting it anymore, let's assume your bill goes through, you know, so what are the disposal options available for it? You talked a little bit about using recycled plastics for wood products, but those are recycled plastics. I want to talk about the ones that aren't recyclable because those are the ones that are in this bill. And so what are we going to do with these plastics that aren't being recycled?
Yeah, my bill is the export of plastic waste for final disposal, being waste that's just going to be put in a landfill.
Yeah.
And not recycled at all. But that waste now, we can refine that into clean, in refineries now, cleanly to make diesel fuel. And we have the technology right here in Canada. Again, there's a huge dock manufacturer out east. And, you know, if any viewers have went to Friday Harbor, which is a beautiful spot on Lake Simcoe, and saw the new dock facility that they put in, that is all made out of recycled plastic that was destined for final disposal. And that's what I'm saying. That's why this bill makes sense. Canadians don't want the vision of seeing their plastic for final waste, you know, washing up on the shore in Jamaica or Dominican Republic or anything like that.
Okay, so there, I mean, I know that there is an energy from waste facility in Durham region, and it collects York and Durham non-recyclable plastics, and it's converted into energy. And I think there are 6 plants like that in Canada, one certainly in Durham. And the one in Durham right now, I think does about 3,000 tons a year, but they're telling me that they need to expand it. So is that something that you would work on because it is York and Durham non-recyclable waste that's going into this facility to capture the energy that's built into the plastic product itself to convert it into energy? So if they need to expand that, and we're not going to be sending our waste offshore anymore, is that something that you would work on to help them expand that plant?
100%. That would be part of, you know, an environmental fund that I would look to get in place, work with the region on that, work with Durham region on that, whoever the other MP is on that. If that's something that needs to be expanded, and that is new innovation, again, that Canadian, we have great innovators here in Canada.
Yeah.
We just have to tap into that. And I think, you know, Karen, that's one thing this pandemic has showed is you know, I can tell you, being out in the riding, looking at businesses that have had to pivot, and even people in our own communities that have stepped up. I've always said small things add up to big things. And I look at what went on with Remembrance Day and all the celebrations around Remembrance Day. People still wanted to get out, do this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to have to take another break, Scott. I'm sorry, but please don't go too far away. We'll be right back with Mr. Davidson after the break. Welcome back. My name is Karen Wolfe, and I'm here with our MP Scot Davidson. Before the break, we were talking about his private members bill, which he's trying to get through to ban the export of non-recyclable plastic waste. And so, Scott, you mentioned a little bit about where that bill is in the process. Just wondering when you're hoping to have that ban in place.
Well, I'm hoping right now, when it was introduced, Karen, we're in the second hour of debate on January 27th. I'm saying it'll be voted, depending on the schedule, February 3rd. I hope it'll be passed. Then it goes back to committee, which you and I chatted about before. So it will go to the Environment Committee for discussion. That'll probably be a day will be set aside for that. And there may be amendments to the bill. They will bring in witnesses to talk about the bill, and then it will come back after that and be voted on again. Remember, this is a huge process, which it's great that it is. So everything is scrutinized, and it will actually end up in the Senate as well, and it will be looked at again.
Okay, so do you have any idea of, how much it's costing us to export our waste, compare it to what the options are to keep it here in Canada in terms of costs?
There's been no direct figure. I think the cost for me, and looking at the hundreds of thousands of tons that have went out, is the cost to the environment, Karen. We have the capability here, as you said, and various things that I've talked about to be quick about it, but we have the technology, the innovation here, and when our plastic, when we lose control of our plastic and it goes to the third world, that's when stuff's burnt. CO2 emissions are just burning it on the shore. They're dumping it in the ocean, and we lose control. Canadians want to be responsible for their own garbage and their own waste here.
Yeah.
And that's why we're going to put forward on that. The U.S. or the UK and Australia have both banned the export of plastics for final disposal. So I think as we have to become leaders in Canada on environmental issues like this, this is common sense legislation that should be put through.
Yeah, and I think there's an expectation by the world that we are leaders too. So I'm going to move on to another topic, and one that you touched on actually earlier on in the program. And certainly I want to congratulate you for being elected the chair for the Ontario Conservative Caucus. And I understand there's 36 federal Conservative members who are from Ontario. And I want to know, what does this group do?
I know a lot of people, you know what, a lot of people go, Scott, what is a caucus? So a caucus, it's just, our bunch of Conservative MPs from Ontario, or a national caucus is every Conservative MP or every Liberal. That's what a caucus is. So at the beginning of every parliament, there's an election that takes place. You actually had to run in an election if you wanted to run. And there's a speech and all that sort of thing that go on. So it was one thing that was important to me. And I actually had some colleagues from when I was here early in the by-election that asked me to stand for election. I was proud to do that. And so now I represent the 36 MPs. So we meet every Wednesday, Karen. We talk about important issues that are important to Ontario, that from all our ridings.
I see, okay.
We meet every Wednesday for a week for an hour, and every MP basically gets 2 minutes if they need to talk about what's important in their riding, if it's in Kenora or wherever. And then following that, I have a regional. We have national caucus, which is with all the MPs. Then following that, I have regional meetings with the regional chair from BC, Alberta, Manitoba, Quebec, and Eastern Canada. And all that information, we share it all. And then we meet once a month with the leader, who's Aaron O'Toole now, great guy. And so we meet once a month with him. So it's a great process that goes on, great conversations, and it's important. I brought actually all 36 MPs to the Nottawasaga. We had a little retreat and did a lot of outreach in neighboring ridings back in October, I think it was.
And so, you know, during those meetings, then I guess you would be really looking for issues that are common among the 36, and you would feel that those are the ones that we want to bring forward then, if they're common among all 36.
That's right. So in different ridings, you know, there's water level issues in the Great Lakes. Obviously, small business. You know, we have some MPs down near Niagara Falls, and again, talking about sectors, hospitality, tourism, these sectors have been just devastated.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is the backside stuff we talk about, Karen. Even if you walk around Ottawa, there's a lot of buildings. I'm looking out my window now. There's a lot of industrial, commercial office towers that are empty. And you got to remember, we haven't had a year end yet. So there's going to be a lot of buildings and businesses and people that are going to be claiming vacant taxes. And you won't see that until next year with municipalities. And they're going to say, wow, we got a big shortfall. This is all things to come that we haven't seen yet. Not to be negative before Christmas, because we're going to fix it all, Karen.
Okay, we've got 1 minute left, and I want to ask you this question. So going forward, what do you think might happen when the government tables its new budget next spring? I mean, I know what everybody's thinking. Just what do you think?
Well, I think there has to be, you know, the NDP has been propping up the Liberal government. So, you know, let's face it, we'll have to see what happens there. It might be, you know, regardless of who votes what, we're going to take a constructive look of everything that's in the budget.
Okay.
They've promised $100 billion. We're going to see where that's spent.
Okay.
I'm going to worry about your money, Karen.
Scott, we're going to have to go. I want to thank you so much for doing this. I've really enjoyed it. And I wish you and your family a very happy, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I hope to see you sometime during the holidays.
I'm sure I'll see you.
Thank you very much for being with us. That is the end of our program, and I'm wishing you all happy holidays.
Happy holidays.